I'm gonna be honest with you. I didn't think I was gonna be making this video quite so soon, but I figured, might as well. Today I'm going to talk about probably one of my favorite video game franchises ever, and if you're someone who's talked to me online, you're probably sick of me talking about it by now. uh, this is about Trails of Cold Steel. I'm going to be talking about all four of them as fast as I can. Yikes. When it comes down to it, Trails of Cold Steel is a game for someone who loves turn based games, has either a nostalgia or a love for them, someone who loves really interesting lore, someone who loves, all right, loves characters and character development. It's for someone who loves those exact aspects and wants those aspects to be the main focal point. This isn't for intense, high end MLGs. No, the same for them. This is more for old people who love turn-based games, who love old school, like that stuff. That's who this game is really for. Now, when it comes down to it, Trails of Cold Steel as a franchise is, like I said, easily my favorite because it focuses on the aspects that I myself care about the most. It also has a lot of aspects that I personally love. Granted, I wish some aspects were done better, yes, but I still love the games as a whole. When it comes down to it, I think what I have to highlight the most is that there's tons of potential for, wait for it, romance. Tons of potential for amazing romances. Now, the biggest problem with that is we needed to hit the gas at a certain extent when instead we hit the brakes, which was a bad idea. Now, before I get too heavy into that, let me instead tell you some of my favorite aspects of each game, one by one. That's a lot. Now, I'm going to try and keep it small, short, sweet, and simple. When it comes down to it, the biggest advantage of Trails of Cold Steel 4 is that it does tons of things right across the board, but the best thing it does is its boss fights. They're intense, even on the lowest setting, even on the easiest setting, because you wanted to make sure you had a grasp of the mechanics, like I often do, because I often screw that stuff up or fail to learn it in an effective way. So I started off on the easiest setting. It's just kind of a rule of thumb with me, so this way I can have the mechanics down pat. This way I can master that. Then go on to the harder settings. Now, when it comes down to it, I think the biggest thing to remember here, the boss fights, are the things that's going to really be your biggest payoff. Sadly, it's not the romance, which kind of sucks. And the reason is something I'll get into in a little bit. Why the romance feels so weak here. And it's not entirely its fault. When it comes down to it, Trails of Cold Steel does some things very right as well. Very, very right. But there's also a lot wrong with it. But I think the best thing it does, the thing that I think is the best touch, is that it manages to make this whole change of background, this whole huge change in the MC's life, it does it really well. It plays it off believably. You can believe that this is exactly what he chose to become. You can very easily believe that this is something he'd be good at. And it's also something that's kind of alluded in the prior games, but makes way too much sense. I'm not going to go into too much of it because I kind of want you to experience it, especially if you're someone who likes turn based games. Definitely pick this game up. It is so much fun. It is done very well. I recommend playing the first one. All right, I recommend playing them in the actual order they were released in. Play the first game, then the second, then third, then fourth. For two major reasons. You're gonna enjoy the game more that way. You're gonna enjoy the later games far more that way, and you're gonna have far more context in your head because the facts are is the synopsis that's given to you is absolute worthless trash. It is. It does explain things well enough. It doesn't explain why some of these things are so impactful, and it also doesn't do a good job of condensing the meaningless stuff that was in the middle of all the important stuff. Not to mention tons of stuff like subtext and important happenstances and stuff like that get completely glossed over. You're not going to have anywhere near as much information. You're not going to have anywhere as near as much experience, understanding, or even good of an explanation of what the hell is going on in the game if you just skip the first 2 or 3 games. Don't do that. It is a piss poor idea that's going to ruin your experience entirely. It'll take the fun of the game and snap it in half. Play them in order. You'll thank me later. I promise. Yes, it's going to be a bit of a grind. Yes, it's going to be a bit slow in the first game. But believe me when I say this, you're going to have a better experience in the second game because you'll have an understanding of what's going on and why. You'll understand the motivations that are popping off left and right. Far better if you play them in order. Now, another thing to remember is that in the second game, it does a lot right. A lot right. There also is, however, some wrong. Now the problem is though is that the thing it screwed up is something that sounds idiotic. It sounds stupid, but it's what happened. They decided to take important, heavily relevant content and gut it so this way they can put it inside of a drama CD. And that drama CD you could only get if you're either in Japan or you get the collector's edition. They don't sell a collector's edition anymore. So unless you happen to be able to purchase one off of eBay, you're kind of SOL. Now, the first game, once again, does a lot right. Does a bit more wrong, and on top of that, makes the mistake of ripping out heavily important, heavily relevant, constantly referenced content. They gutted it and put it in a drama CD, which once again you could only get if you're in Japan or if you bought a collector's edition. Now, thankfully, there is one or two beautiful bastards who decided to upload those drama CDs onto YouTube. You are the sexiest, most wonderful person in the world. I hope you're watching this. I'm buying you a beer if I ever meet you in real life, okay? I'm buying you a beer. And in case you ain't old enough to drink beer, I'll buy you a soda, alright? I'll buy you a soda. I owe you one for that. Thank you. Alright? You are awesome, and you deserve awards. For crying out loud, I'd give you a Nobel Peace Prize if I could. Dang. Ugh. The facts are, those are some of probably the biggest issues. Now time for the expanded bit. Oh joy. When it comes down to it, the third game's the biggest problem, and it's a problem that does negatively impact the fourth game. The third game decided to pump the brakes on all romances. All of them. The main major canon character, the two not as well done canon characters, and all the characters who are definitely not canon by any stretch. Literally, they get the brakes pumped so hard that you feel like the first 2 games never happened. That's how hard the brakes were pumped here. I feel like I might as well be starting over from scratch like the first 2 games never happened, never existed. That's not good. It isn't. It sucks. It's stupid. It's annoying. And as I said, it negatively impacts the fourth game. Despite how hard the fourth game tried to make up for that brake pumping, it did not do it well enough. The facts is the romantic endings are probably far weaker than they could or should have been because of how hard those brakes were pumped in the third game. Now, some people want to think that the reason why these were pumped was a way of trying to make it so that this way the other characters could feel like they're just as meaningful romances as the canon characters. The problem is though is they didn't and shouldn't have gone about it that way. It was the dumbest way to go about it. If their real goal was truly, genuinely to make it so that this way all these other non-canon characters were as important, what they should have done, instead of pumping the brakes, what they should have done was hit the gas for some of these characters. Just one example of, I think like 12 or 13 different examples I could give. What they should have done was hit the gas, making it so that this way the romance was popping off a bit sooner. That these things were being handled better, being better written. That would have been a far better idea. Far better idea than the brake pumping that they did. It's pointless. It's stupid, and it makes all the romances really cheapened. It feels now less meaningful. It feels like all of a sudden now these romances are kind of empty or lacking, I guess is the better word. I feel like lacking might be the better word. So, It feels like they're lacking, which kind of sucks. All right, it sucks. Now, I'm not a big fan of their main major canon character, the canon character who is obviously their favorite. I'm not a big fan of the blonde tsundere. I'm sorry, I don't. Half the time, I can't even remember her name. That's how bad her first impression is, and that's how forced everything else about her is. It feels like they were trying to aim for a tsundere, but then kind of failed. It felt like they made this rotten, ungrateful little troll who just. Normally, when someone saves your life, alright, even if you do accidentally wind up in an awkward position, typically your first thing isn't to then slap the shite out of someone. Typically, your actual response that you should be giving, especially if you're a functional, non horrible person, is thank you for saving my life. Call me crazy, but if someone saves my life, I'm not going to slap them. I don't care how awkward the position is that we fall into. I don't care. For all that I give a crap, she could be straddling my face for all that I care. The first words out of my mouth aren't you suck, screw you, or an insult. No. The first words out of my mouth are thank you, you saved my worthless life. Thank you. Those are the first words out of my mouth when someone saves me. Alright? Again, I don't care what position we wind up falling into. You saved my life. In my book, you are a badass, awesome person for saving me. Thank you, is the things you should be saying. Alright? Hell, you should be one step away from kissing their foot. Alright? They saved you. Be grateful. Because they could have just let you die and saved themselves. Alright? They could have. Easily. It'd take no effort on their part to ignore you as you're about to die. But they didn't. They saved you. Be grateful. Be happy. Smile. Something. Anything other than smack that person. And then be a dick to them for 2 months. 2 months. Oh my god. Again, I think their goal was to make a tsundere. But boy, God, did they fail at first. Alright, they failed that. I cannot emphasize that word hard enough to make it clear how badly they failed. Oh my god. Now, as someone who watches a tons of anime, I know a tsundere. You failed at making a tsundere. You failed critically. Like, we're talking rolling 100 ones in a row level of critical fail, okay? You could not have failed harder if you tried, alright, at first. You couldn't. when it comes down to it, it doesn't help that, like I said, it's already bad enough that she's an epic failure in the first impression. After that, it feels so forced, so full of BS to a point where the entire relationship feels like a joke. It feels like a forced joke for the sake of forcing a joke. Like, eventually there's a big. I'm not going to tell you what the reveal is, but there's eventually a reveal, and it feels kind of like bull. Alright? It feels like a load of bull. It's not believable at all, and it doesn't help that it doesn't really get any better. It just becomes more full of BS the further you go. Now, if their whole thing it was they wanted to try and create an impact where you had an impact in these characters, there's another way we could have gone about it that would have been far better and far more believable. You know, like playing Cupid for a little bit. Picture that for a second. That'd be kind of dope. Or maybe I'm just weird. Or maybe it's because I had friends where I was often doing kind of that. Or maybe something else. Who knows? When it comes down to it, what I think would have been great if their idea was they added these other romances in just to kind of create an impact. I think what it would have been far better is if you could have played matchmaker a little bit. I don't know about your high school experiences, but I know for a fact in mine, everyone's up in everybody's business, especially romantic wise. All right, if you have a crush and you tell anyone, they will tell either the crush or someone who knows the crush, and as a result, the crush will find out. That's kind of how that works, right? You can't hide nothing, all right? Nothing. So it would have been kind of a neat idea if you could have kind of played like a pseudo matchmaker kind of idea, setting up specific romances on top of chasing your own romance. I feel like that would have been an awesome decision and would have been really impactful and would have kind of further fleshed out not necessarily these characters, but your character. When you really stop and think out about it, Rain kind of doesn't have much of an impact when you think about it. I mean, really stop and think. Aside from uh, the kind of stuff where he's kind of forced to be relevant, um, what does he really do? Um, choose out a couple characters. Um, pulls some miracle BS out of his bunghole. Uh, um, uh, ooh, the game's a really awesome night. Although there are other characters who also could have gotten it though, because they all kind of went to the same place. They went to the same school, so technically anyone from that school could have gotten it. Oh, there's the sparring mission, but at the same time, it's also comes with its own little ass pull of its own. So, um, uh, he no, he doesn't even do that. Yeah, when you think about it, his overall impact is kind of weak, especially when you look at his impact from the school to the school. When you think about it, every time someone graduates, they kind of leave some kind of an impact. Whether that's positive or negative depends both on the school and the student in question. You see, that's kind of something that's often overlooked is you do have an impact. Granted, the schools more often than not make it a negative impact, especially here in America where school is kind of an effing joke. Where you're kind of just learning useless crap that's not going to actually help you in life. And what's more is the few things that you do learn that do help you in life are far and few between. When it comes down to it, when it comes to scores and rating and giving numbers, I think for me, it goes as this. Trails of Cold Steel 4 with a 10 out of 10. Even though it does, like I said, have its romances get hurt hard because of Cold Steel 3, it still manages to do an exceptional job in so many areas. And then the boss fights, which are the most memorable part at all. I I can't stress how much fun they were and how intense they were and difficult they were. Oh boy. Especially like the last three were hell. Those were tough as nails. Like I barely eked by. And I set my character up for success even. I gave my character buff to defense, HP, and strength, and I still got stomped hard. Second place to me has to go to Trails of Cold Steel 2 with a 9 out of 10. Thanks largely in part due to how its pacing was handled. It started off, kind of intense. It's just me and like one dude, to me and just a couple of people, to me and a skeleton crew, to me and an entire school, and then to an awesome, huge long dungeon crawl that I enjoyed immensely and enjoyed the final boss a ton. Dang. Third place for me has to go to Trails of Cold Steel 1. Trails of Cold Steel 1 had acceptable pacing in some areas. Other areas it was a bit slow. As much as I loved looking at the beautiful Nord Highlands, especially since like I said, well, not like I said, wow. I personally love whenever I can to take shots of like landscapes and stuff like that. So to me, the North Highlands resonated with me really well because of that love of landscapes and stuff. So that helps. Granted, I still often used turbo mode to get around because it was so slow and with not much to do. Fight enemies who are a little too weak for me to even really bother dealing with in mass. Like if I kill like a couple of them every once in a while, I'll basically be at a point of where there's no point anymore of fighting them. Um, that game for me actually wound up being an 8 out of 10. I think exhaust is starting to catch up with me already. Great. When it comes down to it, uh, I have to give it probably an 8. It was a lot of fun. I do kind of dislike the fact that important and relevant and referenced constantly content was gutted and put into a CD. Now, in last place, there's got to be Trails of Cold Steel 3. Now, last place being a 7 out of 10. A 7 out of 10 is still impressive, okay? That's still good. Alright, that's still a pretty great experience, alright? Even with my issue of it hammering the brake on tons of characters and their romance that had been developed the whole time, even though I dislike that, and even though it negatively impacts the future game, which kind of bugs me personally, I like tons of aspects about the game. I like the overall change to the format of what the MC is doing with his life now. I like it. It's believable. While I'm not the biggest fan of the one chick that's brought in, I do like the other two characters relatively well enough. And I did like the game more and more as I went. So that kind of helps. It also managed to do a decent job of tugging at their heartstrings at a decent number of moments. This is something that all the games excel at in different ways. I feel like when it comes to just making me feel either really happy, really sad at one point, and even kind of at one moment, kind of like it's kind of this moment where you're starting to feel a little awkward. Like it's not the kind of awkward where it's like you're starting to realize that you're doing the wrong thing. It's more you're starting to feel like, man, it sucks. These people are getting used. F, man. And that hurts a little bit because you're like, oh, it kind of makes you kind of feel something, which is greatly appreciated by me. I like it when I feel something. If I feel dead inside as I play your game, odds are I'm not gonna play the game for long, if at all. If you make me feel anything, doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's something positive. Make me feel something, and I'll play your game. I may not always complete it. I may not always replay it, but I will definitely try and play your game then. Just make me feel something. Doesn't matter if you do it through gameplay or story. It doesn't matter how you go about it. If you get me to feel something, I'll definitely try your game. That's a definite. All right. Now, my probably my biggest want for the next Tricycle Steelers, like I said, I want them to pick. Do they want to do a singular focus, or if they want to do mass number of romances? And if they do the mass number, you need to do a better job of ensuring all characters feel like canon. With that being said, if you do a singular character, you have to now elevate it. You wouldn't have had to if you didn't kind of fail at the whole spreading your attention across the board deal. You failed at that, so now you have to make up for it a bit. Now, the best way to make up for it is to pick or choose and make sure you do them better than you ever have, regardless of which one you choose. And this is kind of the way of it. Now, I am curious where they're going next. I am curious how they're going to replace the Divine Knight battles, because supposedly they're thinking about kind of keeping it in the same cinematic universe, or I guess virtual universe, whatever. Um, I kind of don't want them to bring back the Divine Knights. I just don't. I don't feel like it's really something needed. Anyways, that'll be the end of this video before it gets too obsessively unnecessarily long. Uh, I wish you all luck. I hope that you maybe found this interesting, compelling, maybe laughed at me. I am an idiot and make good jokes. And no, I don't mean I am funny. I mean I am the joke. See ya!